I also see a changing competitive landscape in the supply chain. The pandemic is just accelerating elements of it. Is the future for ports and terminals to invest more into logistics operations on the land side? Because that will give you some element of control on that part too. I also see a changing competitive landscape in the supply chain. That was actually a change I believe was coming anyway. The pandemic is just accelerating elements of it. It was going to happen regardless. And I see this as usually I've been fond of calling it, this is a multi-front battle. You got a lot of different service providers basically fighting over the cargo owners. Now, when I use the term freight forwarder, let's all be clear that this is an extremely vague term. We can call them forwarders or logistics providers. What's the exact? Very vague term, but let's just use it relatively vague. I see many different ones. Right now, to a significant degree, freight forwarders control a lot of freight directly from the cargo owners for a lot of various historical reasons, both good and bad. But the battle ongoing going forward is you have ocean carriers, and I would imagine air carriers, but air is not my expertise, sorry. At least ocean carriers, they are trying to regain that through two different prongs. One prong is through digital tools, which you can use to at least target some of the, let's call it, easier, more transactional freight, not the more complicated ones. And to some degree, they're successful in doing that. Some of them are going down the path of wanting to become end-to-end logistics providers. And let's be clear, it's not the first time the carriers have done that. This is the third or fourth time, depending on who you look at it. They are pretty gung-ho in doing it. And given the amount of money the carriers are making right now, it is highly likely that they are going to accelerate their drive towards this also through acquisitions over the coming 12 to 24 months. I would certainly also expect carriers that up until recently were not really gung-ho of going into logistics yet again, might actually contemplate doing so, because in the current constrained environment, controlling some of the landside assets, they might see that as a path to safeguard the supply chain of some of their key clients and upsell that one. Then, of course, into this freight, we have, let's call them the existing freight forwarders, all of them. They are in a completely, not only are they in a battle with the carriers that try to regain part of the cargo, they're also in a battle with, let's call them the new digital freight forwarders. And that's a battle that's fought on a completely different front. Because on one hand, you have the digital freight forwarders, many of them launched 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And again, I might be exaggerating a bit here, but many of them came into the market of saying, all you really need is fantastically good tech, and then we can wipe this inefficient industry off the face of the planet, and we can make everything digital. The digital providers found out relatively quickly that there is a physical element to this industry too. So if you don't have some of the physical ways to deal with, well, the truck actually ran off the road, now what do we do? If you don't have that capability, it doesn't matter, you have the best tech in the world. So the digital providers, they're in a game where they are really good on the tech side, but are trying desperately to catch up on, let's call it, the physical side. Then you have all the existing freight forwarders that are good on the physical side. They're in a desperate battle trying to ramp up on the digital side to match that battle. So that was already two more parties into this fight over freight control. On top of that, we do have some ports and terminals, as we heard, for various reasons, also jumping into the freight to take part of this battle. On top of that, you have cargo owners, some of them like Amazon or Alibaba, that's going to join into the fray as well. So this genuinely is a large multi-front battle that's not going to be resolved today or tomorrow. This is going to play out over at least the next 10 years, where it's for control of the actual cargo owners. Ultimately, and I mean that's just my 2 cents worth on this battle, is the carriers to some degree are going to be winners on this. They will regain some of the control. Some of the digital forwarders, they will win on this because they have a proposition that is fairly attractive. Some of the freight forwarders will also survive. Some of the ports and terminals, that will be absolutely good. And yes, Amazon and Alibaba will also be good. Then you might ask, well, hang on a second, can everybody win this game? No, they can't. Because here's the downside. If I look at the freight forwarding industry globally, it is phenomenally fragmented. Got a huge amount of small and medium-sized freight forwarders. By the end of this decade, I would not be surprised if thousands, if not tens of thousands of those are gone. What, at least the way I'm seeing here, if I look specifically at the freight forwarder segment, what I see here is a bifurcation. That you're either going to be relatively large, and you're going to be both good at the physical side and on the IT side. Then fine, you have the scale advantage, you have the global reach, you can really handle sophisticated solutions. Absolutely yes. And then you're going to have a huge amount of very small niche freight forwarders in places where you have a defensible niche. You might have a very specific cargo type, a very specific customer type, very specific geographical locations. That means, if I am servicing purely between the airport and the port in Abu Dhabi, that is really a small niche. And fine, you can find lots of those small niches around the world. But the huge span in between, where you're not really a hardcore defensible niche provider, and you're not really having the scale, I'm not saying all of them will go away, but a large proportion of them is not going to make it over the next decade. That is really the battlefield, that the way I see it, that we're faced with going forward.